All right, so we're using material from Sean and Equist called Present Over Perfect. I've slightly retitled it, Enjoying the Present Over the Perfect.
Like that.
Started out last Wednesday. We're on number 2 of 5 tonight. The title of this one is called The Roles That We Play. What I've done tonight is I've taken the original video and I've chopped it up into 4 smaller videos so we can watch a little bit, talk a little bit, watch a little bit, talk a little bit. And so we'll see how that is. It's a bit of an experiment. So just to get us started, because we're going to be talking about some things from our childhood. What is one thing you used to do as a child that you are so glad that you no longer do?
I'll start, and it'll probably explain why I am the way I am. In first grade, we used to have a contest to see who could run into the brick wall head first.
Wow.
Head first.
I'm glad I no longer do. When did you quit? Love you too, Dale.
That explains the flat spot.
He had a big fro back there in the cushion. So
A lot of product in it.
yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
What else? One thing you did as a child that you're very glad that you no longer do.
Gym class.
Oh,
Gym class.
yeah. Especially junior high gym class.
Yeah.
I have one. Again, I don't mean to make much of it, but I grew up in the Bronx, and we lived on a corner, and it was 4 corners because it was in a section. And the way it was, the kids sat on one corner, and the other grouping sat on the other corner. And for whatever reason, we liked our corner, and especially in the summertime, we used to like to play in the tar. And the tar is nothing more than asphalt when it gets really hot. And so we would spend hours just digging through this tar, getting real dirty, and then of course it couldn't come off.
Yeah.
But for some reason we really liked playing in the tar.
I'm sure your parents loved that.
Yeah, they did.
How about 1 or 2 more?
Let my mother cut my hair,
Mm,
especially the bangs. She was never good at bangs.
yeah.
That's why I don't have them to this day. Can't trust bangs.
One more.
When I was a little girl, about 3, I bit one of my mother's friends' little girl. So I'm glad I don't do that anymore.
It's so nice to meet you, Tom.
It embarrassed my mother. I remember it, and I was only 3 or 4. My mother was so angry with me because this was a really good friend of hers, and she brought her little girl over to play with me. And I was an only child, and I'm sure I was pretty selfish. And she went for some of my toys, and I didn't like it, and I just bit her. And my mother was so embarrassed that I remember to this day, I never bit another person because I got punished pretty severely, I think. It was back
Sylvia,
in the
they
day.
taste better as they get older.
Right. Thank goodness I don't do that anymore.
Well, that's good. So tonight we'll be talking eventually about some of the things from our childhood that have a pretty significant impact on the way that we live our lives today, especially roles that were assigned to us when we were young that we still tend to carry out today. So this first video vignette is sort of an introduction to that idea. So I'm gonna get this video going. I'm gonna play with the sound a little bit. Give me a thumbs up if and when you hear it, okay? Okay. I need to go back and reshare the screen here.
To interpret what she's saying by reading her lips.
You can do that.
I found myself playing this role. I was dependable. I was responsible. I was the get it done person. But I had exhausted myself so completely. I had isolated myself from the people that I cared most about. I was pushing and earning and achieving, but I wasn't connecting in deep and meaningful ways. And so I started to ask myself, this whole process for me feels sort of like peeling an onion. So this is what we know. What's under that? What's under that? What's under that? And so I knew, like, okay, this is somehow the role that I've been given to play. Where did it come from? And are there any through lines kind of throughout my whole life? So I started to sort of peel that onion and mine through my experiences. When did I start? Who told me? And so I looked through it, and there's always been in my life this intensity, this sort of frantic desire to outrun something. I've never been good at sitting still. I've never been good at being quiet. I'm terrible with silence. I like to have the music on and the TV on. I like to also be painting my nails and also have something on the stove. It drives my husband absolutely crazy because he's totally one of those people that wants to like watch a movie completely black, big surround sound. No one's on their phones. We're just like completely connecting. And I want to like have a couple phone conversations and cook and maybe work on a project and go through a couple of magazines. And it makes him bonkers. And it's how I watch a movie, but it's how I go through all of life. Always 10 or 15 things going on, never stopping very long, never focusing on one thing. And so I think probably I'll always be one of those people whose like internal motor is set a little bit fast. But along this journey, I feel like I've been like picking up every stone. What about this? What about this? What about this? What are the things that need to change? What are the things I need to unlearn? What patterns have I developed a long time ago, but are no longer serving the person that I want to be? One thing I've found is that a lot of these roles, these expectations, these patterns, we picked them up a long time ago, but they expired somewhere along the way, and we're still living them. So what does it look like to look honestly at each of those roles, those patterns, those expectations, and to have the courage and the bravery to leave some of them behind?
Okay. So some of what she shared there made me think of this text in 1 Corinthians 13. This is part of a larger section in Corinthians where Paul is addressing worship practices, attitudes toward things like spiritual gifts, and ultimately sort of perceived notions of spiritual maturity and immaturity. And so we kind of jump in the middle of that section, and Paul says, "For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known." So I want us just to sit with that verse 11 there. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. I think in the context here of 1 Corinthians 13, he's addressing some people who are holding on to immature, childish ways of thinking about life with Christ, and trying to prod them to drop some of those childish ways and be more adult in their thinking. But I also think there's a larger principle at play here, that even beyond our spiritual life, our life with Christ, just in general as human beings, there are childish ways of living, thinking, believing that at some point we have to recognize as childish, and we have to drop them. We have to leave them and adopt more adult, grown-up ways of thinking, living, and believing. So she asked this question in her introduction: what patterns have I developed a long time ago that are no longer serving the person that I want to be? What patterns have I developed a long time ago that are no longer serving the person that I want to be? So let me just throw that question out there as we're sort of think broadly and generally here, and we're going to hone in much more specifically. But I wonder if that text and this question, I wonder if that prompts anything for you as you think about your own life. Can you identify any patterns that you developed a long time ago, even as a child, that really no longer serve who you want to be now?
I think of the word fairness. That's not fair, which is, in a young person, you see that a whole lot. And as a person talking to a younger person, yeah, it's not fair. Life's not fair. And making the adjustment to, that's not how, life's too complicated to be fair. There are too many people's needs, too many people's wants in the way. But a child is always thinking, I think, most children are always thinking in terms of what's fair and what's not, which is an improvement over just, I want what I want.
Yeah.
But the next stage is filled with traps too.
Okay, good. Yeah. What else? As you think about patterns that you've developed as a child or young adult that don't really serve the person you are, or at least that you want to be? Art?
I could say sharing. I hung on to my candy, pretty tightly, and wasn't willing to give it up. And one would want to grow into being. I wasn't all that forward with, giving that up.
Yeah. So holding on to what's yours and not releasing it for other people. Good. One or two more.
Well, I'd go with black and white thinking. The notion, well, what is it? I think as you grow older, you realize that certitude is often the problem. And black and white thinking only covers the simplest of things, which means it doesn't cover most things.
Yeah. One more.
I think sometimes it's the things that are subtly good that can really backfire the worst. So if you grew up in an environment where you were constantly needing to be perfect, or you weren't allowed to have any feelings, or you were the person who had to take care of everybody, as an adult, those qualities a lot of people really like. but they can be very self-sabotaging. So it's hard to find the balance. But if you stop being that person, sometimes your friends don't understand that. Sometimes you're not as nice as you used to be, or you know. So making the changes can also be hard when you start thinking more about what you need or what your family needs from you. You know, in the way of being present and calm and, you know, all of those things, because you're less focused on being perfect for everybody.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And so some of us have been brought up in families where that really is the role that we were assigned. We're not allowed to have needs or express those needs or desires. And then when we grow up, well, we have needs and desires. We learn to express those, verbalize those to others. But it's hard on us and it's hard on the people around us. Okay, so continue to think about this. This next video vignette, in this one, she talks briefly about one of the messages or views of spiritual life that she took with her from childhood into adulthood. And so this relates specifically to her relationship with God. So we'll watch this and then come back and talk.
And when I realized that through line, that intensity, that frantic energy was compromising the most important relationships in my life, it was a huge warning sign, a red flag for me. It's time to sit down and understand the roots of this and the patterns. And if I learned it, then I can unlearn it. And so this journey for me has been about unlearning the role I've been playing all my life. Fast, frantic, productive, because it was compromising my relationship, certainly with myself, my own body, with my spirit, my relationship to God. I wanted the spiritual part of my life to be a respite, to be a safe place, to be a place where I felt my worth and I felt loved, where I could rest, where I could experience grace. But instead, I found it was sort of one more area where I felt like I was trying and failing. It was one more set of things to do, one more set of things to accomplish or to check off a list. And if I'm honest, it became easier for me to do things for God than to be with Him. I had sort of lost the ability in so many other ways and in my spiritual life to be deeply with. It was easier for me to do for, to do on behalf of, to work on behalf of, than it was for me to truly be with. And like in so many other areas of my life, I felt like I was just pushing and extending and trying and failing. And when I
All right, so this line here, I think is very, very thought-provoking. It became easier for me to do things for God than to be with Him. It was easier to do for than to be with. As she ties this back to the role of being productive and busy and a contributor, and that's then what led to this. But I think this this can be a symptom of a lot of other roles or messages that we receive in childhood. So I want to look at how this expresses itself in one place in Scripture, Matthew chapter 6. So Jesus says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know, what you're doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So later in the text, Jesus goes on to talk about fasting. So these 3 acts of righteousness: giving to the needy, praying, and then fasting. And he's describing a group of people who are engaged in these activities largely as a means to a selfish end. Giving, praying, fasting have nothing to do for them with a deep, meaningful connection to God. Instead, it's a way of feeling like they've accomplished something significant. It's a way of gaining attention from the people around them, of bolstering their own sense of self and worth and honor and dignity in their community. But it's sort of been divorced from anything having to do with God. So when I hear this line, it became easier for me to do things for God than to be with God. It was easier to do for than to be with. I think of this teaching here in Matthew 6 because I think that's very much what Jesus is describing here. So question, in what ways have you ever manifested that sense of doing things for God over being with God? So try to think of that in your own life. What have been some ways in which doing things for God have sort of been divorced from just simply being with God?
Well, even reading through that scripture in this context when we're asking this question, it kind of made me aware that one could be looking just to get that reward from God and still not be with God.
Mm-hmm.
That even though the way this story is told and the way the verse is right, it's like that's our ultimate, is to get a reward from God. But if it's kind of done on a surface level or intellectual level, it's kind of like, okay, God, I did these 5 things for you today. Aren't you happy with me?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow that doesn't feel like a really relationship with God. It feels very childish.
Okay, yeah, that's good. God is simply the giver of gifts,
Mhm.
the dispenser that I can put a token in.
You've been a good girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I think of the time when I was for 5 years, I knocked doors to save people from their religious groups that they were part of.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, that was doing stuff for them. I was teaching them the Jesus that I had been taught, which is not the Jesus that I believe in. And I think if I were to go back, I don't doubt my sincerity, but I think in retrospect, I was not with God at that time. In fact, I think a case could be said that had I been with God, it would have scared the crap out of me.
What would you say motivated that behavior?
Motivated?
Knocking on doors to save people.
Oh, it's a sense of I don't know, I can't remember the word, but we were the only ones who were going to heaven. And that's what motivated. Okay. And I told people they were going to heaven. I'm not proud of that, but I told them. Mm-hmm. And I was sincere when I said it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we were part of the same kinds of teams, there was also peer pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie,
What comes to me is that the part in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, I never knew you. And there are times in my life when I thought, I feel like I've been playing this role, but I didn't know Jesus. So I think, it just sort of speaks to this.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
wasn't putting the effort into just knowing him. I was putting more effort into doing for him.
Thank you. Let me do, Robert, I saw your hand up, and then Art.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Robert.
Whatchamacallit? This, what you have on the screen now, makes me think a little bit about the dialogue between Mary and Martha. And Martha was busy doing many things and very busy, but Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. I just want to say that.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Robert. Yeah. Art?
Yeah, listen, I'm sorry, I'm sincere about this, but I'm a little mixed on this because I think we're driven to servanthood, and I think service is for God. Now, you may say that your service allows you to be with God, but I think you can't dismiss the fact that God is God, and we're just God's children, and I think we're driven to being of service, which is for God. Now, we could be with him when we're providing the service, but I don't think you can dismiss servanthood. That's what I think.
No, yeah, I think you're right on the money there, Art. It's the relationship that God desires of us is a relationship that involves both doing for and being with. And I think what Sean Nyquist is trying to draw attention to are the seasons in life where we, for one reason or another, we get involved in doing for and forget who we're doing this for. That there are other kinds of motives that come into play that drive us to do religious things or spiritual things. And the call is to return to a more pure motive of I'm doing this for God because I love God and loved by God. So, yeah. Okay, let me play this next section is a longer section, and I want to make sure that we get to it and have some time to explore it. So Shauna Nyquist is going to share some examples from her own life of roles or messages from her childhood that have impacted her in her spiritual life today. And then she's going to share 3 brief stories of other people's childhood messages or roles and how that's impacted them. Okay, so we'll play this and then we'll stop and talk some more.
Messages that sort of slid into my identity. And one of those messages. How did I get here? I got here because a long time ago, I received a set of messages that sort of slid into my identity. And one of those messages is, what you do is work hard. What makes you valuable is your ability to work hard. That energy, that intensity is what propelled me into this sort of insane way of living. And I think for many of us, we don't choose these things. But as little children, we don't say like, I think I'm going to be a perfectionist, or I think I'm going to be super codependent, or I think I'm going to hang all my value on how much money I have in my bank account. It's sort of this very complex soup of where we grew up and our parents and our extended family and our homes and what we read in our churches, and all these messages kind of swirl together. And they hand us these little identities as little children. And then part of the work of adulthood is saying, is this the person I want to be? Part of adulthood is choosing to keep or shed the roles that were given to us a long time ago. So I have a friend who I can see, like I've known her for a long time. I think she's truly one of the most creative people I've ever met. When we're out somewhere, she hears the music and totally like clues into it. She loves to go to art galleries. She's super in touch with nature. She has this truly creative spirit. And we were up late one night and we were kind of just talking about all kinds of things. It was like late enough at night where you can kind of just say stuff. And I said, I don't know if it's okay to ask this, but it sort of surprises me, with as deeply creative and gifted and artistic as you are, that you don't make anything, that you don't paint, or you don't take pictures, or any of those things. It just, that's so much who you are. And just like that, she said, Rachel's the creative one. Rachel's her sister. These women are in their 40s. They haven't lived with their parents for 2 decades, but she still has this narrative that says she is and I'm not, and there's only room in this family for one of us to be the creative one. What a loss, right? What a tragedy for her, for the life that she could have experienced as an artist. What a loss for the rest of us. Who knows what she would have recorded or painted, or a dance piece that she would have choreographed, or a photograph, or whatever. Just, there's these stories that we let define us long past they were ever meant to. I have another friend whose entire childhood message was sort of, thank goodness you're beautiful, or like, good thing you're pretty. Like, the thing you have going for you is your beautiful face, which is a lovely thing, I guess, until you start aging, until your beautiful face doesn't look quite as beautiful as it did when you were 18 or 22. And so she's in this total crisis where she says, the value I was given, the role bestowed upon me was to be beautiful, and that's fading. So am I fading? Who am I outside of my beautiful face? Another friend, I think this is so funny and telling, and so just like how most of our lives are. She had this boyfriend, and they'd been dating, and her family lives out of town. And it was time, they were dating kind of seriously enough for them to go visit her family. So they went and they had this great visit with her family, and they came back and she was kind of debriefing with him, like, well, did you like them? And what did you think? And he said, oh yeah, totally, they're great. Here's something interesting though, until I met your family, I didn't know you were stupid. And she's like, this is not where I thought this conversation is going. Well, what are you talking about? And he says, ever since I met you, I've seen this fear and this anxiety in your job, in your church role, in your volunteer life, where you always think you're about to get found out. You're always overcompensating. You're always pushing because you think that something bad is going to happen and you're never going to measure up and people are going to like find something out about you. And he said, I've never understood why you can't see the gifted, capable, beautiful woman that you are. But then I sat at your family's table and they talk to you like you're dumb and you don't even know it. It's so natural to you that they tease you and take shots at you that at this point you don't even know it's happening. And isn't that true? Sometimes we're given these stories about ourselves, these roles, these labels. And even though they're incredibly damaging to us, they force us to live in all kinds of unhealthy ways. We keep them because we don't know what we would have or who we would be without them. We hold on to these roles and identities because they keep us safe. We know that they might not be right, but they're at least familiar. And some of adulthood is having the courage to allow those masks to fall, to stop playing the roles we've been playing all our lives, to put down the script that someone gave us, to slide it back across the table and say, I'm going to write a new script. I'm going to speak a new role into life, one that God gave me, not one that someone gave me a long time ago, that expired a long time ago, and that's been harming me ever since.
Okay, so this line here, part of adulthood is choosing to keep or shed the roles, messages, stories that were given to us long ago. We hold on to these roles and identities because they keep us safe. Some of adulthood is having the courage to allow those masks to fall, to stop playing the roles we've played all our life, to write new script. Let me just share some additional content here. This is in a book called The Fragile Bond. And the author here, Augustus Napier, reviews some of the many roles that children are given in different families as they grow up. See if any of these resonate with you. The peacemaker's job is responsible for keeping the peace by being an intermediary, go-between, mediator to pacify those who are irritable or angry. The parental child is a miniaturized adult. Parental kids are not only drafted into the practical aspects of running a household, but assume responsibility for the parenting of younger siblings under functioning parents. They grow up acutely aware of others' needs, usually to the exclusion of their own. The marital child fills the vacancy left by the physically or emotionally absent parent. They become a surrogate spouse, attempting to fill their parents' needs for friendship, companionship, and emotional support. In extreme cases, their relationship can become sexualized. The helper acts as an assistant to the parent who may be physically or emotionally overwhelmed. As a result of all the helping they do, they're missing out on many of the playful aspects of childhood. The dependent child is held in an extended, exaggerated childlike position taught by their parents to feel helpless and weak. The abandoned or invisible child is physically abandoned by one or both of his parents, or they may be physically present but not able to connect the child in ways that build trusting, secure bonds. The unwanted child believes, perhaps correctly, that they're the result of an unplanned pregnancy and not wanted. The criticized child can't seem to do anything right. Frequently, one parent's angry with the other, and that anger is misdirected at the child, or the criticism could arise from feeling jealous of the spouse's love. The betrayed child may have confidentiality violated when they confided something personal to a parent, only to have their private conversation revealed to other family members, or a parent may favor a sibling. The betrayed child frequently experiences difficulty trusting that others are dependable. I think this is the last one. The clown's job is to keep things at home light and funny by making jokes and distracting others from feelings of sadness, depression, or grief. The hero makes good grades, excels at sports, gets elected to student council in obvious ways that credit family. There's a serious downside to this role that involves feelings of loneliness, guilt, insecurity, all of which are intensified by the obligation to rescue the rest of the family from painful feelings that they're unwilling to face. And the rebel is a rule breaker, defiant, uncooperative, won't clean up her room, won't do her homework, may skip school, get pregnant, drive too fast, sometimes called the black sheep, sacrifices her own happiness in order to take the heat off parents' troubled relationship. So we heard in the video, we heard 3 or 4 examples of roles or messages from childhood that have been brought into adulthood that create challenges living life with Jesus. Napier includes several there in his book. So consider yourself, what roles from your childhood influence you today? And what would it mean to put down that script? So I recognize this calls for a pretty high level of introspection at this point, but anything in that last video segment or Napier's list resonate with you?
Chris, I suspect that,
He muses.
no,
No, you're good.
that it's probably not a matter of which one, but what combination, or, I'm convinced now that I'm totally screwed up, and it's hard for me to figure out which category I really belong to. But
Yeah, I would say that I'm very clear that numbers 1 through 4 is what I grew up with. And I've been unlearning that all my life. Part of that, part of it is that there's some good from that. I think there's stuff that I have that I think God uses. Not to my detriment, but to my amazement. But I had to go through some anger stuff to recognize that I'm still okay despite the way I grew up.
Thank you, Laconi.
If we assume that everybody can look at this and go like, oh, that was me, that was you, that was me. We're basically saying there's like no family is successful. And I kind of want to reject that, push back a little bit against that, because yeah, every family is functional at some level. But I think many families also have a very supportive, loving, caring, thoughtful way of raising their children. You know, and it's not. So even families that you end up feeling one of these scripts for yourself really strongly, it's not all bad. It's, you know, and maybe you don't have to put down that script. You just would have to maybe modify it, you know, think about it a little more broadly, a little more deeply. You know, I grew up in a family where I needed to be the helper and a few others as well. But I think that's been a good thing. You know, maybe I have to look at it sometimes and be like, am I too invested in that? I need to maybe invest a little bit more here and less in that. But it doesn't, being a person that needed to help in this, my family, and take on the responsibility, perhaps cheated me out of a little bit of childhood fun. But it also gave me a lot, gave me a sense of responsibility and caring that I think has been good for me and other people.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really a good reminder that none of these are the whole story of our family of origin. So one or two or three or four of those roles might be ours, but there are also other roles and messages that were productive and beneficial that we also carry with us. And so it's helpful to look at all of that to see how they continue to shape us.
I think the last question there, what would it mean to put down that script? I think the answer for me personally is that I need to develop good boundaries.
Okay.
And I think I've been doing that. My yeses have become yes, my no's have become no, because years before, it was a mess. I would say yes, because I needed your approval.
Yeah, there was definitely a script in my life that I've had to fight from my childhood, that I have had to fight my whole life, which sentence I can remember from my childhood from both my parents is, what would people think? What would people think on any pattern of behavior or choice, or the way you dressed, or whatever, the way you talked, you know, whatever, what would people think? And I realized that very much limited their life, because it had to be a very constricted life, that you did only 100% safe things, but there are no such things. And but that's the sentence I remember over and over, and you know, I had to work with that to maybe don't give that all that much thought, or and you know, and I think I was spared from going the other way and becoming a person who didn't care what people thought.
Yeah.
But because that's likely what could have happened with that script. But it's just a bad script.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we can summarize that script in a single sentence that really captures the lasting impact on us. Yeah. That's our timer.
I'm gonna go societally.
Okay.
I feel like this is important. As a Black person, I really grew up thinking that I was inferior to you in this room, who are white. And intellectually, I know that I'm not. But I still have to work on not being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes families assign roles and scripts. Sometimes it is always also the larger culture assigning those roles and scripts. And often the majority is assigning certain roles and scripts to everyone else that are terribly destructive. Yeah. So I have to say, I'd not thought of 1 Corinthians 13 with these things in mind, but sitting sort of with this material, it's led me to really rethink that one verse there in 1 Corinthians 13 about recognizing childish ways of thinking and living and choosing to put them aside. And I think that goes for what we receive from families of origin, and then Laconia, I really appreciate your expanding that to what we receive from society as well. That's important work of adulthood. There's one more video segment, but it's a little longer, and so in ways it's a summary of some of the things we've been talking about. So I don't think I'm going to press play on it. So let me just ask, any closing thoughts or comments from what we've looked at tonight?
I want to remind me and everybody else that we have the ability to choose who we will be.
Mhm.
Now, choosing it and becoming it are two different things, but they begin with the choice. And I discovered that as my parents drove out of the college parking lot when they dropped me off for my first day in my freshman year of college. No one knew me. They didn't know whether I was smart or dumb, athletic or not, outgoing or an introvert. They knew nothing about me. And I basically almost chucked the whole thing and redesigned my life around who I wanted to become, and just took it a day at a time. And I think to some degree, it was successful. It saved me from a lot of baggage that I took to college with me. But when I speak with a young person now that's going off to college, I remind them that this is their fresh start. They can decide how it's going to go.
I appreciate that, John. Yeah, every single day we have the power to choose that, don't we?
Yep. It starts again every day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave the Zoom session open for a bit. I'm going to stop my screen sharing and stop recording.